Hi everyone, I'm Tori West, my pronouns are she, they, and I am the editor and founder of Bricks magazine, and I'm here today with 6 incredible individuals for Lucy Yak's Pride campaign. We've been brought here today to shoot this year's Pride collection, designed by Brazilian queer artist Amanda Lobos. This year's campaign focuses on the crucial role of chosen family and our support networks of queer people all over the world. I'm joined by Dev, Ruji, Yasmin, Tatum, Nikki, and Kitty. Let's get into it. It would be great to ask each of you who you came here with today and what is your relationship with them.
So I'm here today with my really good friend Ruji. So we've been friends for about 12 years now. We originally met when I was at uni in Bournemouth and Ruji lived there. We met on the customer service desk of a popular supermarket and our relationship has just evolved over the past kind of 12 years. So yeah.
I love that. How about you?
So my name's Kitty and I'm here with my dad, Nikki. Dad is comfortable with the pronouns of she, her, but I call her dad, just to let everyone know. And yeah, obviously we've known each other for a while.
Tatum, would you like to?
Sure, yeah. I'm here with Yasmin. We're really good friends. We met in like group settings and then realised that actually maybe we should hang out one-on-one, and then we did that and our friendship has like really developed from then.
That's lovely. I think often as queer people, especially when it comes to Pride, we often always get asked similar questions, and it's predominantly focused on maybe our struggles or the hurdles or the challenges. But I think one of the most beautiful things about being queer is the community and the sense of joy that it brings us. So I'd love to start off with asking, who or what brings you a sense of joy?
I think for me what brings me a sense of joy is seeing our community coming together to celebrate in different ways, but also celebrating different parts of the community as well. So we've seen Pride such as like Black Pride or Trans Pride really grow over the past 4 or 5 years, especially over lockdown as well, but also just regional prides really having their times.
I would say like local, it's really lovely to see, like you said, with big prides like Brighton and London and Manchester, they're just money pits. But then I come from a town called, I come from Bournemouth, so it's really nice to see like having local charities and supporting local charities and raising money for those that need it, and it's really lovely to see like local prides just getting bigger, but not to the extent that they're just commercialised.
I get joy from being, I know it's cliched, but from being my authentic self, and it's just been a revelation to me, and I hope my family as well to have that fairly late in life, not that late, but fairly late in life.
That's beautiful. Anybody else happy about things? Any joy?
I can just to echo Dad's, obviously here as an ally and a huge advocate for the LGBTQ plus community. But yeah, I think the joy I get from seeing my dad live authentically is the biggest joy of all, I think, especially as Dad mentioned, she transitioned later on in life. So just such a role model and just so inspiring to know that it's never kind of not worth doing. And yeah, seeing Dad just live absolutely her best life now it brings me a lot of joy.
Oh, that's so beautiful. I think sometimes constantly having to explain ourselves or our identities can become tiresome. What's a question that you're tired of being asked?
I think for me, being asexual, I think online in particular, I often just get asked, especially around Pride time, it's just like, why are you here? Like, why is that even included? Like, what are you doing at Pride? Why do you care about that? Why should you be included there? And yeah, and I mean, I've been going to Pride since I was like 14, so it's been, well over a decade now, and we've been part of the community for a very long time, so I always feel like that's a bit of an asinine question.
Yeah, and a lot of people can say, well, why does it matter so much, like what your sexuality is, and like why are you always going on about being queer? And I'm like, because it's the best thing about me, like it really is. And like every day I'm like, thank God I'm queer, because like even I'm actually really fortunate that I have always sort of known that I'm queer. But having said that, I didn't really find my community till like later on. And once I found that, like it changed everything. And even just like thinking in a queer way, So it's so interesting when people are like, but why is it such a big deal? It's like, because it is like, there's nothing, even though I'm bisexual, I say there's nothing straight about me, because even when I am in a relationship with a man, it's like I'm so queer through and through. So yeah, that can be frustrating when people don't quite get that, because it's like, of course, it's something that I feel is everything about me.
Just because straight people are boring and they haven't got anything else to
Yeah.
they haven't got anything else to question about, so.
I'll take that.
Sorry. I mean,
No, it's fine, I'll take it.
Yeah, I think for me, there's a couple of parts to this. So the one is the constant need to come out when you enter new spaces. And actually, for me, it's something I've developed over time where I can't be bothered to come out. And actually, I go in, and if people want to assume something, they can, but they can have a conversation with me. I'm more than happy about that. But then also sometimes it goes back to the tonality of questions and the positioning of questions. And there's something that I've recognised over the years is that when people ask me about my coming out as per and my experience, I'm automatically painted as the victim in their story and their line of questioning. And while it was tough and while there were loads of bits to navigate, I actually had quite a positive reaction from family and friends. And when you layer on intersectionality on top of that with like society and community, for me, there's an automatic assumption that every queer person has had a negative experience.
it's like they just want to feed on your trauma.
Yes.
Well, that's why I wanted to ask the
Yeah.
first question to be more around joy, because I feel like it's not something we're asked. And I feel like we have such joyous experiences with each other that those things aren't often highlighted. It is always seen, I think sometimes with pride, it's always seen as maybe, again, through this narrative of feeling a little bit sorry for us.
The amount of times like I code switch just to be like, I'll put on a black t-shirt and a black hat just so it's just that like, it's just an easier taxi drive. Like, I was like, where are you going? I was like, just deepen my voice. It's just like, just those things just make your life just a little bit easier, because like, you just never know. And it's like, I get in drag like on the train going to a gig. And it's like, you just never know what's around the corner. It's like, but luckily I'm also just 6'2" and feel pretty big.
Yasmin, you briefly touched on this in your previous answer, but one of my questions was that asexuality is often reduced to the plus sign in the LGBTQ plus acronym. And ace voices are frequently sidelined in queer spaces, as you mentioned. And as someone who identifies as asexual, how do you navigate these spaces, and what changes do you think are needed to make them truly inclusive of asexual people?
Even if you look back at like queer theory from like the 1800s, like asexuality was always in there. And so like I kind of feel like if we're talking about sexuality and diversifying those conversations, asexuality just kind of has to be part of it. But I've also kind of noticed that, I guess, obviously part of, you know, Pride as a movement has always been about sexual liberation and being able to practice your sexuality freely and not be persecuted, and demedicalizing and dismantling all of the stigma around it. And I guess at the same time, then the messaging ends up being very focused on like the sex you're having and how, and then people kind of just make it seem like that's all queerness is. And then when you bring asexuality into it, you kind of have to like unpack that a bit more. And I think some people aren't really ready to do that, and it just automatically like it can't fit in with the conversation. And I think with this kind of weird division that I feel like is increasing within the community more between people of different orientations, and almost like a kind of weird competitiveness and like fighting for space, it kind of creates the impression that like whenever I do something at Pride, people are kind of like, oh, so gay people can't go anymore. Oh, so now a lesbian isn't there. And it's like, no, we're all there at the same time. Like it's not like it's not like we can't all be present at once. And so yeah, I feel like that's kind of where the tension kind of comes into it, because people think that you can't have multiple conversations at once and they don't benefit each other, but I think that they do.
I think that it's like you just said, it's just like the LGBTQ, it's like all focus on sexuality, but then it's like we also have gender, and then like, because it all counterbalances and it's all synchronized, but then I personally stop using like the acronym so much and just use queer. Because I feel like just using the title queer, it's just like, if you feel like you're part of the queer community, that's there. You're not trying to put yourself into a separate category within this acronym. Like, if you just feel queer, you're and it just makes I feel it's just a lot easier. I know it, like, for some people using that term is still a slur for some people of like older generations because it's packed with a lot of trauma, but I feel like being reclaimed by today's society and just using it to encapsulate anyone and everyone, and it makes us feel, I feel using queer just is more of a community, and it makes everyone stand together no matter what place on the spectrum you identify with.
Ruji and Dev, as queer performers, I'd love to hear a little bit more about your experiences of this, maybe share your perspectives of why they've been so integral for you both.
I feel there's a few things. One is that we lived from 2009, we lived in a very sweet spot for being queer and gay, where it was mainstream. It was starting to be more TV shows, there was more film, there was more representation, and so like equality got a lot better. Brands started using queer voices and queer faces, and so everyone started feeling more liberated, and especially in nightlife, that was an age where I was coming out and going out, I started going to the straight clubs because you weren't being called this, that and the other. You weren't getting hate crime because everyone's like, oh no, it's cool to be this, it's cool to be that. So people started venturing more out of the gay scene and going into the straight nightlife. But I also feel that a big one is apps. So things like Grindr and Tinder, where you can hook up with someone. People would also, back in the day, people would go to these clubs to eventually at the end of the night find the love of their life for 24 hours and then send them on their way. But now you can do that by the tap of the button in your own bedroom. You don't have to now go out. You don't have to now go spend extra money. Obviously, cost of living nowadays is a big factor. But I feel that there's lots of pots that are reasons why I feel like nightlife is, especially queer nightlife, is dwindling.
Yeah, I kind of agree here. I think the cost of living crisis really affected queer people in a very different way to maybe heteronormative people as well. I think when we look at queer communities and sometimes in the way that we are set up and some of the difficulties that we've faced, queer people are often worse off in a number of ways, and that's then reflected in kind of the money that we're able to spend in different places. Now that's quite a generalised view on it, but actually looking at kind of where people are spending their money, having a good time and a great night is really, really fun. But if you're balancing that with the cost of living and being safe and making sure that you've got a safe space, I know a lot of people would probably go for the latter. I also think when we look at queer nightlife in general, I have seen a decline in clubs. I've seen it visibly. There's so many places where even 2-3 years ago we'd go but are now shut down, whereas actually we find a lot of queer nightlife now going into kind of heteronormative places. Yeah. And actually it's really interesting, and I think there's one big thing that we don't talk about, and actually it's how we feel safe in those spaces, and actually how we're looking at security firms who are now educating themselves and understanding kind of the needs of the community, and I've seen a really positive shift in that. There's still a long way to go, but actually really small steps there, even in terms of ID and getting into clubs, accepting that people may have different names, people may have different kind of genders on their identity, and how we move past that as well.
And I think both need to exist, right? So we've got those standalone, and then there's lots of amazing queer nights that go into those. And as long as the training's there, and with the security, and as you were mentioning, that is vital. Otherwise, it has to be there. Otherwise, people can't have a good time. But I also think, touching on wanting to get an early night, as a disabled person, it's I can't start my night at midnight and go till 6 in the morning. So we really also need to be changing what those nights look like in queer space, well, anywhere, queer nights. And maybe what I'm liking seeing is people are doing workshops before a night out in the space. So it's not just about alcohol, because I'm not a big drinker. I do drink a bit, but it's I want to have connections that aren't always around that. I've never really been someone, I think there's this idea when you're queer or bisexual that you're like promiscuous, and I've obviously great if you're going on a night out to then have sex, like do your thing, love that for you, but that's not really why I'm going out. So it's like we need to have more variety on what like queer nights look like.
I'm loving the resurgence of sober daytime things for queer people, or like book clubs, or just other things and other spaces, not just solely about night. Like nightlife's obviously important, but I really agree with you on that. Like, I'm autistic, I really have sensory overload quite quickly. I have to wear loops in clubs, I can't hack it. So it's like I do need sometimes an alternative space where I still feel like I can be in this community. But sometimes I just want to be at the book club, Take me to the gay book club.
Start up a crochet
let's
club.
set one
Yeah, basically a crochet club. That's what we need. But as well as nightlife, I think, especially I always think about this as someone who does production, there needs to be more inclusive environments in the workplace as well, I think, for queer people. Tatum is a queer non-binary actor. What are some meaningful actions that other people have taken for you on set that make you feel seen and safe?
Yeah, well, I always feel comfortable on a set where the production team are queer, or that I'm seeing more women, because a lot of it, historically, we've seen it's like very cis man heavy. So for me to be on a set where it's like, our pronouns are discussed, or even just, it has to be at the root, right? So then if you're having stuff in front of the camera, you're having that like diversity, that's great, but then I want to see that behind as well. And I think for me, where I've felt more comfortable is where it's on a call sheet, you've got your pronouns there, things that are just discussed before. It's the same thing that's like, there's definitely an intersection of my queerness and my disability, because it's like, I want to be able to give an access rider that has my access requirements. The same thing as I want my pronouns to be there, because it needs to be normalized that when I'm on a set, I'm doing my work, I want to concentrate on doing my work well. I don't want to be thinking, oh no, is this person going to respond badly? And I have had like a lot of microaggressions with my gender or with my disability. So yeah, I guess just like at the very start, that being thought about and it being on the call sheets, that there's like, that people are considering that from the start.
I think so. I think a lot of people see it as like what happens on set on the day, but actually the best thing is to know all of these things in pre-production, with, as you say, pronouns on call sheets, access needs, and all of those sorts of things. Because everyone's used to just being like, "What's your dietary?" But it's like I think it's taken a little bit of time to actually even get pronouns on call sheets. Because I remember doing it at Bricks for the last, I don't know how many years we've been doing production. And clients would come back to us and be like, genuinely, you'd been working in the industry for 20 years, come back to me on the call sheet and be like, oh, that's the first time I've ever seen pronouns being asked before on a call sheet. Like, what are you talking about? You've worked in this job for 20 years. What do you mean? So I think as much information you can get beforehand, I think really helps. I don't know if anyone else wants to talk about workplace or any tips for other employers.
I think, as speaking from someone trying to be the best ally possible to the community, I think that's such a good point. I think it's basically asking the community what they would like from you is the best thing to do usually, and I think that's a perfect example of, it's lovely to hear that was correct and they did what you needed and it completely changed how you felt on that day at work. Like, yeah, I think that's a really big thing that as people trying to be the best ally possible, usually just ask like what's best, or like just mirror. A big thing we talk about as a family is mirroring, and that was obviously a learning for us when we were kind of learning we even had a conversation about, is dad going to be the right name, like that kind of, all those conversations were had, and so we speak a lot about mirroring kind of in that same vein.
When it comes to what can other people do, I think it's always be open to ideas, understand what you can do to make that change without you needing to be in that community, so allyship. But then also being able to challenge a business and say, cool, you've got all of this, you're saying you're doing all of this, let's actually see the actual work. Let's hold you accountable, because really, I think especially in this day and age, it's so easy to talk the talk, but it's the walking really. And that's what's going to move us forward.
Nikki, I know you touched on this a little bit earlier in one of your questions, but I'd say in British media, trans representation is often centred around the younger voices and their experiences when they're being spotlighted, which again, of course, invaluable. But I'd love to hear how your experience of someone who's transitioned later in life.
Yeah, it's not for me to really comment or judge on the younger people, but from my experience, transitioning later in life, because you've gone through more years, basic maths, isn't it? You've gone through more years. There's more stuff to get one's own head around, but also the family unit as well. So I think when these things happen or decisions are made, and that was my decision, the consequences can vary dramatically, and I think they can be very different to younger people. And I do tend to work off pictures, so there's a couple of pictures I would describe. One is, I talk to people a lot about throwing a stone. So when I decided to transition, I threw a stone into the pond. And I think how the pond ripples depends upon, obviously, how big the stone is, but also how the pond copes with the stone and how the ripples fall off. And the analogy there is the family unit and the friends. And some people, when they transition late in life, and I know people who have had this, that stone creates a tsunami. And basically what it does is it causes huge upheaval, and the family network and the social network don't cope with it. And we'll come back to how Nutshell can help in that. So I think the stone, and in my example, I was extremely lucky because I have some fantastic family around me. And so my pond was relatively calm, I think. But to compare against the youngers, I think is different. But I do think it is different. It's not for me to judge the youngsters or to say how they feel, but I feel that it is been different for me. And the second analogy that I would draw, basically being older, is that there's probably more people on your friendship and family bus when you're a bit older. So I'm on the, what colours are buses in London? Red. Yeah. So I'm on this red bus, and basically I've got lots of family and friends. And when I gone through the transitioning process, a lot of people did, and probably go earlier than that. I would have thought quite a few people of my family and friends may get off the bus and choose not to be on that bus with me. I'm pleased to say my family all to a person stuck with me, but many friends got off the bus. But the good news is that on that bus, I got many more people on it. So I finished up with a much fuller bus and a much happier bus.
I love that. That's so beautiful. I started tearing up a little bit then. Good job we've got these pride-coloured tissues. On that, you briefly just mentioned your charity Nutshell, which you also run together, right? I'd love to hear a little bit about that and the work that you do.
Yeah, sure. I love the bus analogy. I've not heard the bus analogy before.
So beautiful.
So Nutshell, is a charity that myself and my dad and my sister Lucy, we founded 4 years ago, and Nutshell was effectively created out of our experience as a family. The main role of it as a charity is it finds and funds therapy for the family members of non-binary and trans people. So quite a niche within a niche, but the view is kind of the learning we had as a family is that Dad explains, obviously we tried best we could be the best support for Dad in her transition, but it wasn't kind of an immediate, easy experience for the close circle as well. The thing that we kind of managed to do a few years down the line was reflect on, to be honest, on our privilege. And I think it's a really good thing to do where you reflect. And the fact that myself and my sister were able to have therapy because we could afford to pay for therapy is extremely rare. And our view was that therapy effectively not only helped us in terms of our journey, but it helped us to have space to have our own emotions. It helped us then to have space to therefore ask questions that probably would have maybe been hurtful for you to hear. So it was absolutely invaluable for us to have that therapy. And we actually had a therapist who worked also with Dad. So really kind of facilitated healthy conversation and just was really beneficial for our journey. So kind of on that reflection, that's why Nutshell was created. We want to be able to offer that opportunity to absolutely everyone, and the NHS sadly doesn't. You can't get any funded therapy as the family member or partner of a trans or non-binary person. or if you get some form, you're on a queue for about 8 years. So Nutshell was created to offer that funding, and we also find therapists and match people as best we can in terms of location. You can also do it online. So
That's amazing.
Lovely. Whilst we have this lovely platform on this roundtable, how could other people get involved to maybe support the charity?
Oh, that's a great question. So I guess the main thing is give us a follow on social media, and we also take donations. We've got a Just Giving page. But yeah, the main thing we try and do at the moment is just let people know we exist. We're still very small. It's only myself, my dad and my sister. So yeah, it's very small, kind of family run. But we have a self-referral for therapy, and most kind of people we tend to help are through self-referrals. So literally kind of handing out flyers and people discovering us that way. But yeah, tell people about us, and yeah, give us a follow on social media, I'd say, the main ones.
Absolutely, that's great. Yeah.
Amazing, thanks for sharing that. We've spoken about the importance of allyship. It's come up quite a few times in our answers, and you at the beginning self-declared yourself as you were here as an ally. So I'd love to know from your perspective what makes a good ally.
I actually also, the minute I said that, really regretted saying it. Panic. Yeah, literally. I think that's probably a good place to start. I think allyship actually has almost become a bit of a triggering word, potentially. I think, you have to be very careful with using it. So I immediately regretted saying that. Because I think, again, to Dev's point, it's about action. And I think people are quite quick to say they're allies when, I don't know, you could then ask them kind of what do they do. So for me, a big part of being an ally is, again, kind of flipping it to the community and asking in terms of, I don't know, I think people who try and speak on behalf of, I'll just take our lived example of people who speak on behalf of transgender people, I find personally quite triggering, and I'm not transgender. So I think the learning of that is, as an ally, you should hopefully try and be able to be a stage for my dad to speak, for example. I think a microphone for communities who are maybe shut down and their voices aren't heard, I would say my role is to open the door or to be the stage or to be the microphone, not to speak on behalf. So I think that's kind of a big one. I think the other thing that is sadly more important at the moment as well is that there is a lot of misinformed media. There's a lot of hatred. There's a lot of fake news. There's a lot of really loud voices that are extremely kind of uneducated and quite violent, I'd say. So in that sense, I think it isn't just then for an ally to just, by giving someone a kind of microphone and letting them speak, I do think that doesn't mean an ally should be quiet. I think you should also be loud in terms of your support and protection, I guess, of communities, sadly, because I think that's needed at the moment.
We all have different levels of privilege, and actually sometimes it's not necessarily about always shouting out, like you said, it's about stepping back and saying, cool, X person should have this stage instead of me. Or is this the right time to be shouting about this? Could we divert the conversation to something else? It's those small little bits sometimes, like you said, not even the big things. So yeah,
It's as long as everything's done with the right intent, it's and it's like you said, no one's perfect. We're all here to learn. We're all here to. We all may say things or do things that may offend someone, but it's as long as you step back from that and then learn from that and better yourself, then the world just gets better.
yeah.
I'd love to know if you can name one person or piece of unknown queer history that should be platformed today that people should be aware of.
Well, I won't say one piece of history, but it's a lot of queer history is self-taught. I'm just saying, back at school, when I was at school, you never had, it never came up in RE or PHSE, whatever you had it called at the time. I didn't learn about things like Marsha P. Johnson until after I left school and started coming out. Or I didn't learn about the guy that did, what was the World War II?
Alan Turing.
Yeah, I didn't learn, you don't learn about anything like that. Why is that stuff like that not taught from a younger age. Like, it doesn't have to be so big and so bold, but just interject it into like your history lessons and stuff, and you're just there like, especially if the education system changed, then maybe everyone would be a little bit more open-minded, would be a bit more caring. It's just learning things like empathy and compassion. If people can just learn empathy and compassion, the world would just be a lot easier for everyone.
Also, storytelling is like one of the best tools we have as humans, right? So it's like, it's so important for us to look back at history, to have a place of like where we're at, and it's so frustrating that we didn't have the space for that. But then we can grieve that, and then we can go, okay, what's in our control? And it's like, it's sharing those stories with each other. And I'm like been looking into, just a bit of fun, I'm like really interested in like folklore and history. I mean, I'm not even an academic, but just as like just as a hobby, I'm getting into it more. And there's like this 17th century La Maupin, who is this 17th century sword fighter, opera singer, gender bender, bisexual.
Love.
And so even
What a
Sounds
so
like my type.
Preach. And she would wear men's clothes. Obviously now I also think about when we look back, there's this complexity of us putting the language that we have today on like historical figures, because sometimes we can say, because all of the papers will say, she, her pronouns, but there's lots of stuff within that that's like, oh, it's kind of giving non-binary, but then it's like not really our sort of place to do that. So it's complicated, and we can kind of like discuss what, for me, I'd be like, oh yeah, they, them pronouns, but then it's like, what I'm reading is she, her. So anyway, my point is, I think it's good for us to realise, a lot of people say, oh, non-binary is such a new thing. It's like, no. We've always been here the same as any identity. So I think it's important to have some fun historical things to come out, and then the political history.
Just because it's not in our white colonized history
Yeah.
doesn't mean that it wasn't in other cultures across the world and had different names and different feelings. But
during lockdown, I looked into kind of my faith a little bit more, kind of as a Hindu, and kind of what it meant to me on a personal level. And actually, like, Hinduism's filled with like gender fluidity and queerness in so many different forms. And even when we take away from the religion and look back to the history of India, for example, and the power that non-binary and trans people had throughout the ages, and the places that they held in like royal courts, like, it's insane, and like the way that things have changed over time. And that kind of queer history is something that you explore yourself and find out about, and people don't talk about it because religion and culture change over time to what the majority want to perceive from it. I really enjoyed it because actually it gave me really good ammunition to family members when they make comments, and I'm like, cool. Listen,
I am the Wikipedia.
I'm the better Hindu here. there's no challenge. There's nothing about that now.
I'd love to end on what you're most looking forward to this Pride.
obviously, I love my chosen family. I love my friends. This year, my sister has had a baby, and I come from a very inclusive, very supportive family. But this year she's had a baby, and so she's taken her little niece, my niece, to her first Pride. So I'm happy that she was there. Like, she's like, that's the first thing. Like, she's in a heterosexual, but she's like, ally. But she's bringing her along to her first Pride, so it's going to be a little special for our local Bournemouth Pride.
I think for me, I'm looking forward to, I'm doing quite a lot of international work this Pride Month, and I really like being able to kind of connect with different communities on the ground. I think so much kind of ends up being very online, and I think Pride Month is, in particular, is when you kind of really get to like see people in real life, and I think that there's like already such a spotlight on the community, so you can kind of leverage that to kind of have like some pretty important conversations and hopefully push those conversations forward. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
I'm looking forward to challenging brands who rainbow wash their logo for the month of June, and as soon as it hits July 1st, remove it. But I think that's really important, because actually it's not necessarily saying that you shouldn't do it, but it's saying, cool, what are you doing to back it up for the rest of the year, and how are your kind of LGBTQ plus people supported in that space? It's a really important conversation to have, and actually it's great for visibility for everyone, and it's holding people accountable. And secondly, I'm actually just looking forward to spending more time with people this Pride and being more consciously aware of kind of the impact that Pride has. For me, like, intersectional representation is so important for performance, especially. And actually, I love bringing a whole different viewpoint of kind of performance and visibility to stages. For me, as a person of colour, I remember going to my first Pride and seeing, and also being a fat person, it's really important that I say that, and seeing kind of lineups of kind of skinnier white people on stages, and that's all I ever saw of Pride, and I never saw myself represented, and I could say that about advertising around Pride Month as well. So actually, I really love going to stages and seeing like bigger people around, right? You can be fat and gay. We are proof. It works.
It works.
But also, like, you can be a person of colour and be queer as well. Like, there's all that cool stuff, and I love just seeing the spectrum of people there, enjoying themselves, being free, and actually connecting, and that's what I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing my friends celebrate who they are. It's so nice to see people just really embracing that and stepping into that, and times, yes, are really hard. So I'm looking forward to having, you know, the important conversations and like how do we sustain these actions and look out for each other in dark times and move forward and make sure that we are taking this sort of like intergenerational approach, intersectional approach to everything, because we're on this ride together, right? So we, you know, that's really important that we're always thinking about bringing each other into the conversations, and then on the flip side, having a great time as well.
Yeah.
Because we need it.
Staying proud and staying bloody loud.
Yes.
See, corrected myself before I swore.
Was there any final words that anyone wanted to wrap up with?
We're here and we're queer.
Fantastic. That's a wrap. Woo. Thanks, everyone. That was
Thank you.
We'll do my intro.